My name is Darren Smith. I'm with the NC Center for Geographic Information and Analysis, CGIA, and I'm the project manager for the AddressNC program, going on almost two and a half, 3 years now. With me is Ashton Bailey. She's the developer and designer of the web app that we'll look at today. Ashton. Hello, Ashton. And also with us is Ben Shelton, whom many of you might know from the ortho program. I think a lot of people on this call attends those ortho meetings quarterly. So we have a great crowd today, which is exactly what we wanted. Nearly 100 people so far. And I'll just reiterate from my meeting invite, the goal of this meeting was to get all of the county and the city GIS managers together, as well as those people that do addressing, or those people that submit data to GeoCom, or those people that have a vested interest in the NG 911. And if you're not aware, GeoCom is the vendor who provides the NG 911 GeoHub that all the information, the addresses get sent through every month. So I'll probably refer to them a couple times. So just so you know, GeoCom is who that vendor is. All right, so before we begin, don't forget, if you have any questions, you can submit those through the, if you have any questions through the meeting, you can submit those through the chat, and we'll collect those chats at the end and answer any questions you might have, or you can speak up at the end of the meeting, of course, as well. To be able to see the screen, let me know if you can't. So I want to get a couple things out there. The key word for the entire AddressNC program is that it's sustainable, and that's a really important word. And today, I hope to convey how that really drives the added value of the next-gen data that gets submitted every month to GeoCom. I wanted to make sure it's understood that AddressNC is not NG 911. We hear that a lot, but obviously they're closely related. We derive all the data from next-gen. But one of two overarching goals that we want to put out there today is that we want to give you the incentive to make the data, the address data, better as it moves through the cycle of the NG 911 updating, whether it's daily or monthly, whenever that data gets submitted. So today I'll show you many ways how we can provide that incentive. And one way we do that is through the new GIS web app that its purpose is to visualize quality control and show the statistical side of really organized data. So we'll look at that towards the end of this presentation. And the other goal is to provide a really reliable statewide product that gives everyone confidence and reliability for all those GIS users and all the use cases that you can imagine that use address data besides NextGen. So I wanted to begin with the approach to the overall project and how it works. Before I said the keyword was sustainable, and another keyword is authoritative. So at the top of this list, that's where it all begins. It's a 360 full circle project. So every month, CGIA downloads whatever GeoCom has in place at any given time. And what we do with that data every month is we swap out the old and replace it with the new. Sometimes that data is static, but most times it's not. We see change almost every time we pull in new data. So that data moves through NextGen to AddressNC. And like I said, sometimes that data changes a lot, sometimes it doesn't. But we do measure change as any distinction of any attribute or value or change in location, and not necessarily the number of new points. We'll show you the number of points every month, but just keep in mind, we're going to talk about that a lot, about what change really is. I also said AddressNC is not NextGen. We do supplement the data with many other user-enhanced attributes, such as the U.S. National Grid, XY coordinates, and we even provide Google Plus codes. And so, once again, it's not NextGen, but we provide all this other information for all the other use cases that you can imagine. We do many QC routines, which I'll demonstrate shortly. And in the end, our goal is to take our QC and feed it back to you, the providers, through NC OneMap. And then finally, we push all this data out to free public record streaming services, out to everyone in the state or anywhere that you can imagine. Through NC OneMap, we push it out to the National Address Dataset administered by USDOT. We push it out to Esri, who embeds our geocoding services into their World Geocoding Service. So that's a big deal there, and we'll talk about that later. And then once again, anyone in the state that needs access to this data for any given reason that they might have. So that's the complete 360 approach. Every month, we go through this circle. So because that data is sustainable, that really gives us the freedom to do lots of things with it. And one of those is to invest in new ideas. Every month we come up with something new that we think is important, has value, that we can show to you. So it's a moving product. But at the same time, you'll see that it allows us to put that out there to the user community, that they can trust this data and they have confidence in it and it's reliable, so they can keep coming back to it for their needs. And that was a great example of that this past fall with the hurricane. But in the end, there's many state agencies out there and the general public that has lots of uses for this data. And so, this graphics that I'm showing here, this is a great example of just how dynamic it is. We started a couple years ago with 5.8 million points, and now we have over 6 million. So it's growing significantly. And just this quarter, we've seen about 40,000 new points. It's about almost 400 per county. And in that last quarter, 80% of the counties that submitted had some sort of change, that change that we talked about. And so that says a lot about the growth of the program and how important it is, honestly. Down here in this graphic, that's a great example of change. We're seeing address points that are very current, even before the imagery has a chance to catch up with it. So it's a great example of growth. The addresses are also in demand. So here I just wanted to quick throw out, this is just a sample of all this of state agencies that utilize the addresses besides NextGen, obviously the number one use case. And so any one of these agencies has different needs, things that they do with it. So probably what I'll do is I'll at least key in on one of those, and that's broadband. The Broadband Infrastructure Office is a very great example of a high profile return for this data, probably one of the most high profile we have. So what that address data does, the really high quality data, enables the mapping and analysis of broadband access at specific locations. We can see unserved and served areas across the state. And what that does in turn is it facilitates a really focused investment of federal and state funds. And as an example, last year, addresses were used to challenge FCC data, which is a process that's out there for broadband. And that in turn brought hundreds of millions of dollars back into the state just by using that high quality address data. So very high profile example, but just many that you could imagine. So the next thing I want to talk about is how do you get to this data? So I want to begin with our project website. If you wanted to, there's a barcode if you like. But to get there, just go to nconemap.gov. And when you get there, I'll show that in a second. You can, if you scroll to the bottom of NC OneMap, you can see the data cards, and one of them is AddressNC. And you can, at the same time, you can see, looking at those cards, a lot of the statewide products that CGIA puts out. All of those different cards all tie into AddressNC in some way. So, and if you're that person that's reviewing our QC results, the GIS tech that's looking at this stuff. At this project website, you also find all the detailed codes that we're going to discuss about what our QC means. So definitely check that out. But one thing I definitely wanted to show you on the website was our interactive web map that actually shows the data and our geocoding functionality. So let me switch over there real quick here. So can everyone see the NC OneMap screen? Okay. So NC OneMap is where it begins, nc1map.gov. If you go there, you can either go to the top and select AddressNC, or you can scroll to the bottom, and there you'll see those cards I talked about. So clicking on that card will then take you to the project website. And like I said, I won't go through this, but you can explore this website and you'll find lots of interesting things, especially an FAQ, and many more things. But what I really wanted to show for now was the web map that has all the data. So, you know, this web map serves a lot of different needs or end goals. If you're just curious about looking at the data, or if you have something in particular that you need to look at, you have questions, you can certainly do so. Every one of these points on here has a pop-up, and it's going to tell you information that's really, in this case, it's the IDs for what's important for you to communicate with us. Of course, the address is listed there as well. So if you ever have a question about the data or a point in particular, we recommend you refer to this unique ID. That's going to help us find that very quickly, so we can answer your questions. And at the same time, you can geocode here as well. So we have our own geocoder that this is not Esri based, and it's very fast. And we'll go through this later on. But you know, it has type ahead. It has everything that you need to find what you're looking for. So, you know, if I was looking for 100 Main Street, I'm going to give you lots of choices. Click on that, and it takes you to where it's at. So just real quick, I wanted to show you that this is the data, and at the same time, it's our geocoder. So now I want to get into the process, the details of the process and the workflows that we look at. So data funnels into NextGen from 115 PSAPs across the state, and it funnels into a single set through Geocom. But if you consider all the other sources of data, whether it's different towns or counties or tax systems or those individual PSAPs, it amounts to hundreds of sources of data, all funneled into a single set. So for the program, you know, we have to manage that single set and all those 115 different sources of data, which can be overwhelming sometimes. So for the program, we apply 5 different areas of focus and QC. So those green bars at the top are the QC focus that we apply. And all 5 of those assessments leads to some sort of change. And you know, this is where I wanted to point out the GIS side of you know, of this project is, you know, it's easy to document what changed, but we're going to show you where it changed if you have those questions, and you can then answer a lot of other questions like proximity and, you know, and see what's going on in the area, if there's issues, things like that. So the where side is really important. That's the GIS part. What we hope to give back to you today is the incentive to look at our QC and our workflows by using very intuitive, simple mapping served out through NC OneMap, through the NC OneMap repository. And our project motto is no PDFs ever. We give all of our QC back to you through a spatial, you know, a geospatial means. And once again, the focus there is the incentive for you to look at it and make it intuitive and be able to figure out what's going on and what we found. But another one of our mottos is we're not saying it's right or wrong. We're just giving you the means to look at what we found. So I will begin with consistency. and walk through all of these different workflows that we administer. So I'll say, did you know there's 16 ways to spell incorporated? That's a great example of what comes through that funnel. But with AddressNC, you're only going to have one way. And that's very important to us. For standardization and error, we look at that. We use the NINA standard. We'll go over that very, very soon. But everything goes against that NINA standard for the different kinds of values and attributes you see. We look at conflicts. We look at the authoritative source of data that the state administers, such as parcels and municipal boundaries and zip codes. And we measure what was submitted to us against those overlays to see if there's conflicts. Completeness is very important. We look at redundancy. And we use, one of the ways we do that is with the statewide parcels. So we measure the data against the parcels to find clues to completeness issues. All the data is categorized. Of course, addresses and subaddresses are the focus, but we also categorize our QC by political, municipal, zip, and then all the other things that can go wrong with with all that funneled data. So that's, in summary, the workflows and the focus areas that we apply. And once again, don't forget, it's a two-way, it's a 360 full circle approach here. And once again, we hope that what we find, you can look at it and figure out or make some assessment of what we found. So in summary, this is what you can expect from us through NC OneMap and through our web app shortly, this is the way that we present our results. So we're going to give you 21 different layers through NC OneMap, different categorized data that we talked about. We're going to give you a table of all the inconsistencies that we found that you can filter by county. And once again, it's inconsistencies. We're not saying it's wrong or it's an error, but this is what we found. We give you 12 layers of inconsistencies that show you what was submitted and what we found to be the case, whether it's a standard or a correction or something that was invalid. We look at 4 different conflicts. So we overlay the data with those official boundaries to see if, obviously there's a conflict. And then we also offer up 4 different layers of FYI data. It's not really anything that's wrong or an inconsistency, but it's more like this is good data to see, whether it's missing or it's in the street or it's a new subaddress, a new location. All those things have a lot of meaning to different people. So 21 layers served up through NC OneMap is what you can expect to find. I'll take the next couple slides and go through all those different breakdowns of those quality control approaches that we look at. Over on the right, our goal is to give you one way to spell the word alley, not 3, as you can see here. And all of our data will be in uppercase. So one choice. We code the invalid values that we do find. Sometimes there are errors, but really sometimes it's not so much an error, but it's simply in the wrong field. And so that's another way that we look at it. So 100 Main Street, Unit 1, Building Red is not what we want to see for an address. We want to know the building name and not the color. So in this case, if we get the value of red, we will strike that from the data. For simplicity and relevancy, we also want the end user to be able to do simple queries. So county equal to Wake or Raleigh, not city of Raleigh. So that's good examples of the irrelevant language that we take out of the attribute value. And then finally, back to the right, we strip out all those blanks. Our motto is it's either a valid value or it's a null. So you'll never see blanks if you're a GIS user, I'm sure you've seen this 100 times, you'll never see that in our data. So that's our consistency approach. Standardization, we use the NINA standard, like I said before, and we use that to look at 3 different things. To first assess the value that's given. Second is to determine if it's in the correct field or not. And then finally, the third is to use that standard to change the value and once again, convert it to uppercase. So for example, we're looking at the directional field here. We look at type, directional, separators, and modifiers. So in this first 4 rows here, you can see that all of these values are invalid. So for example, we expect north, south, east, west in this field. We don't expect the value of 121 or the word none or bypass. And so those are invalid values and they're coded as such. And once again, if you're that technical person, we have a schema, a list of all the codes on our project website. The next 3 rows in green are simply places where we standardized it based upon what we want the user to see. And then of course, the last 2 are, there's no change. That's exactly the data that we want to see in that particular directional field. That's a good example of different types of standardizations that we apply. The next thing that we look at are the, well, actually, I'm still on the inconsistencies here. So getting back to that incentive we talked about, AddressNC contains over 75 fields, and I think that's about 20 extra fields that we get out of NextGen. But what we don't want you doing is having to muddle through 75 fields. So for the data that we give you back, we're only going to provide the relevant fields that are relevant to that issue that we found. So for example, for those 20 QC layers that you found, when you open those tables up, this is an example of what you might see for it. So in this case, we're looking at issues with the unit data. So you can see a couple of examples here. In the first row, we have a redundancy issue here where the unit and the suffix number are the same number. So one of those is wrong. We take out those irrelevant values like we talked about before. So we strike apartment and just leave it as B, or # 16 in the last row, we will strip out the #. For the conflicts, once again, we overlay the data on top of these authoritative statewide sources. So here's an example of conflicts with towns, villages, or cities. This is where the state maintains an authoritative layer, and we just simply do an overlay and compare the results. So 2 examples here in the first row, you can see that the incorporated municipality is Chapel Hill, but the overlay says Durham. So the submitted data said one thing, but the overlay says another. So we code that and put it out there in that layer. In the second example, you can see that the submitted data says there's 2 different towns that are applicable to this point, where this point sits, but the QC says we can't have both. It's either an incorporated municipality or it's an unincorporated community. So that's a good example that it can't be both. And then finally, for the conflicts, we do look at 4 categories. We look at, we overlay with the state, with the official record of the county polygons, the municipal boundaries, and the zip codes. So in this example right here, the selected set here in blue, you can see they're coded Newport, but they're actually in the Newport ETJ. They're outside of the official municipal boundaries. And so we strike that and code it as an inconsistency. Regarding zip codes, I'll say that zip codes are probably the most subjective inconsistency of them all, in the order of millions, probably. And I once heard that there's no such thing as a zip code polygon. Zip codes are actually routes. So anyway, once again, take it as it is. This is just simply something that we found. It's a conflict in the zip code data. Switching over to completeness, there's lots of different ways to look at completeness. So I'll start with the improved value. We do a query on all parcels in the state for improved values greater than 25,000. And if we find parcels that don't have points, we assume the point was either missed or it's simply a matter of timing before it will catch up with that improved value plat. In this example, it's clearly obvious there should be 2 points sitting on those improved value parcels with the structures. So what you'll get from us are those yellow polygons that show these locations. Site-specific is another type of completeness that we look at. We query all the points that are outside of parcels. In other words, they're in the street, as you can see here. Using aerial imagery as a reference, you can obviously identify the structures. And so, I understand for 911 purposes, sometimes the access point, the driveway, the entry point to a large property is important or a factor, and we know that. However, many times it's very typical for these points to be created by geocoding and they're left in the street. Nonetheless, our goal was site specific, and we point these out and as a potential inconsistency. And then this next example is closely related to improved value, but it's really about timing, about the parcel plat recording, and if the data has caught up with the parcels, or if those parcels have improved values or not. So we're not saying that this is really something that we want you to look at, but rather it's a good visual. It provides a good means of what to expect in the future. And it also, if you see this, sometimes it might be a clue that something was missed. So it's a great example of the future, if you will. And then there's redundancy. So we have about 900,000 points in the state that have subaddresses. So that's exactly what we want. And this is a perfect example here of what the data should look like. So the parent address is North Poplar, and we know that there's, a handful of different units in that building there. However, we also see in many cases that we might have those 20 or 30 or 100 points, but they all have the same parent address. And that's very common, actually. And that's a good example of change, too. So in this case, we would submit these handful of points in our duplicate addresses layer. And hopefully the next time that it goes around, those are all split out into units. And then finally, the final two examples that I want to show you, they're not necessarily inconsistencies, but rather instances of change since the last upload. So once again, every month we swap out the old with the new, but we think it's really important to show where the change has occurred, and that that has lots of value. It shows that the program is strong, shows that people are really on top of things. So the first thing we do is look at new subaddresses. And this example right here, you can see that the green point was something that existed last month, and it was the parent address. But now, when we do the next update, we find that these new red points are included in the data, and they're expansions of that original green point that you saw last month. And then the yellow points are obviously brand new subaddresses that weren't there last month. So that's a great way to manage change. And once again, I said before, this is the where side of this data. It's very easy to visualize change. And this is in Guilford County, by the way. And then another change that we'll look at in the web app for sure is the new locations. So in this example right here, it's pretty obvious that new addresses have come online with new subdivisions. So we offer either totally new addresses or those addresses that have changed precision, or where a cluster of addresses never existed before. So we know that last month, these locations in blue, this cluster of data has never been there before. And when you get to the web app, you'll see that we can demonstrate a very fast and intuitive way to visualize that change. This is something we're working on right now, about how we measure the change. If it moves from the street onto the structure, that's an example of a change in precision. Maybe the address was there, but it's more precise now. So that's one way of looking at change. All right, so where to begin with all this? Getting back to those 21 layers on the slide several slides ago, we recommend you begin with that summary table that we talked about. And this table is going to provide the counts of all the inconsistencies that we found per county. So I wanted to point out that you can find this table in 3 different places, depending on what reason or what your motives are for looking at this data. The first is through the web app experience that Ashton will show later on, and we'll demonstrate a way to interactively tie that table to a map that you're looking at. Another is through NC OneMap. I'll get to there in a second. And then finally, you can also get to this table through your desktop GIS, ArcMap, or ArcGIS Pro. So, I'll get to that in a second. So if you're that person that's maintaining addresses and you're in there working on the data, we assume you're either operating in Pro or ArcMap. And if so, I would highly recommend adding the NC OneMap service listing to your catalog session. This is a one-time addition that you have to do. But once you do that, you'll find those 21 inconsistency layers that we talked about. So in the end, you find what you're looking for, add it to your map, filter on your county, and you're good to go. And it's really that easy. And so once again, there's that incentive that we talked about. If you're just looking for places where there's parcels in the street, you might look at our floaters layer, or those duplicate addresses that we talked about. So getting back to NC OneMap, it's as simple as this. Is like I said, this is one way of getting to it through NC OneMap. You just go on to NC OneMap and type in address summary, and that will do it for you. So there's that table we talked about. You click on that and filter on your county, and that's all you have to do. So I'll put in here Lee County. If you're that person that's working in Lee County and it's your job to evaluate our quality control, this is a very fast way to find what you're looking for. So like, for example, in this case, we have found 10 instances of places where we have standardized the address type. So I can flip over here to Pro, that user. You can see here's that catalog that we talked about. You would have added the NC OneMap service listing. There's all that data. You find AddressNC, and there's everything you're looking for right there, including the geocoder, which we'll get to soon. So in this example right here, we were looking at those places where we adjusted the type. So you simply add that data to your Pro session. So I call it the address right side. Click on that point. And once again, it's going to give you just the information that you need to know to see what we found. In this case right here, it was a simple standardization. The data submitted was ST, and we standardized that to street. And so that's it. You begin with that table, you figure out what you have to work with, and then if you're that person that's administering the data, you can go right into GIS and get to work. Second to get back to our PowerPoint show. Okay.
Where you search the county again, you had that store.
Sure. So if you're looking at the table through NC OneMap as opposed to GIS or our web app, you just click that filter data button right there. Click on that, and type in your result.
Did that answer your question?
And that was Kimberly, right?
Kimberly.
Yeah. Did that answer your question? All right. So Back to our PowerPoint show. Okay. So switching gears here, getting back to those other derived benefits that we talked about, like I said, everyone has their own use cases and everyone has, what they're looking for. Geocoding is one of the most sought after use cases. And so I wanted to take a moment to talk about that derived benefit. In short, our services are supported as open source, and they can be accessed either online, streaming through a map interface, through desktop GIS, disconnected, or even on your phone. There's a barcode if you wanted to test this on your phone. Compared to other interfaces, the amount of usage you consume is unlimited, and you will not incur any software credits by using AddressNC as you would with other services. And then finally, I'll say, to do geocoding, you don't need 6 million points. You don't need that data. Geocoding stands on its own, as I showed before in that web map. So if you have geocoding that you need to do, whether it's an Excel file or something interactive you want to do, we highly recommend using the geocoder. Let me begin with that first way that I talked about, and I've already demonstrated this, but if you're not doing bulk geocoding, and maybe you're not that typical GIS user, but maybe you're just interested in exploring the data, looking up something interactively, seeing the density of all the points that your county has, whatever, try the online map viewer that we showed before from the project website or from the web app that we will demonstrate shortly. And so that's a very fast way just to see the data and geocode at the same time. And a good example here of the geocoding, I'll get to this shortly, but we do offer many different ways to geocode, including type ahead, just like you would see on Google or something like that. So the first is the offline method. If you don't have access to internet, you can download the complete static statewide package from NC OneMap, and that will allow you to do geocoding without an internet connection. Last year during the hurricane, this proved to be a very valuable asset. As you can imagine, many people did not have internet at that time. You just go to NC OneMap and you can search for addresses and download that package if necessary. You can do geocoding through Pro or ArcMap. If you're that technical GIS user, we give you 4 different ways to geocode. Over on the left, you can do the classic tabular geocoding. You have that Excel file and you need to map all those points. Something a lot of people don't know is you can do proximity geocoding. So you can right click in your map and say what's here. It's going to your location in question. You can do interactive geocoding. Just pop open your locate tool, check on the AddressNC geocoding service, and you can do it that way. And then finally, you can do reverse geocoding too. So if you have a set of polygons that you want to set an address to, you can do reverse geocoding. It's going to find and populate that polygon with the address that is aligned to it. So that's Pro or ArcMap. We offer many different kinds of returns on the data that just recently in the last 3 weeks, we've added 3 new returns. So the returns are what you get when you do the geocoding. Realizing not all data is perfect and not all requirements are the same, we have 5 different types. If you're bulk geocoding, your output that you get, your table that gets created will specifically tell you how that return or how it was found. And if you look at this list here, you can really think of it as an order of precision from top to bottom. But more important, it's going to provide you with a higher rate of confidence and more matches. So if it can't find it one way, it's going to find it another. And there's 5 different ways. And I can step you through those really quick here. First is the point address. The point address is generally considered the most accurate. But the assumption is that the street number actually exists. And and looking at this graphic right here, I'll say that we're very happy what we see coming from all the providers. They do a great job of distributing the subaddresses to be site specific. So any one of these points will tell you the subaddress and tell you exactly what building it's related to. And in this example, we're looking for just a particular unit. And so it's going to show you where on those buildings that it's found. Doing for time here. We offer choices with the geocoding. If you're looking for that subaddress detail, or your area in question is a multifamily area, maybe we offer type ahead functionality. So at the top of this graphic, you can see it's going to find a parent address, so fairly straightforward. However, in the second example, if you provide a keyword number like the number 1 here, it's going to open up all the different options that's found for that parent address. So it's very fast, it's very intuitive, and it's a great example of showing you those 900,000 points across the state. The next type of return is the center line. So in this example, we're looking for 212 Tryon Street, but in this case, 212 does not exist in the AddressNC data for whatever reason. But the center line is going to find that for you and locate it in the correct percentile of the street. We use those, we know everyone submits their next gen 911 center lines every month. And so we actually use that data to achieve this type of return. And then let's see, the fourth one is the street name. So if you don't know the street number, if all you know is the name, it's going to make some attempt to find that street name for you as well and put it somewhere on the length of that segment. Then finally, we just added this one last week, and we're really happy with the results we're getting from this. You can do type ahead to find any combination of intersections of a street. Once again, this is based upon those NG 911 road center lines. And then finally, in summary, looking at last week's data through all the NC OneMap statistical assessments that we have, it's obvious geocoding is really a valuable derived benefit that comes from NextGen. And we also see similar results, similar usage for the points as well. So last week, 200,000 hits on the geocoding service, averaging 40,000 per day. So that's substantial. And I can imagine that last fall during the hurricane, this number was probably 5 times this. So once again, it's a great benefit of value added from NextGen. All right, so finally, I'm going to wrap all that up. That's all the overview and all the data that you can expect from us. And the use case, everything I've talked about. And so now Ashton's going to guide you through our new web app experience. This experience looks like a website, but on the back end, it's really built around high-end GIS. It's a one-stop shop that it's going to let you visualize the data. It's going to let you interact with it, and view everything that I've talked about from many different perspectives. So it offers the technical user, the novice, the person that's curious about their county, whatever the case. So we're pretty excited about this new web app, and our target for release is probably sometime next month, maybe mid-May, something like that. So we will be back in touch with you for sure to let you know that that is online now.
So I'm going to go through the experience that Darren has been mentioning. This is our online version of all of the AddressNC products. So we intend for this application to really be a communication method between us, the CGIA AddressNC program, and you, the authoritative address sources and address users. The content within the application, it aims to aid users to discover AddressNC methods and more importantly, be a place to browse and quickly visualize AddressNC statistics and these inconsistencies at the state level and the county detail all in one place. So we're currently undergoing an internal review, and we plan to incorporate a few updates. And then, like Darren mentioned, hopefully we'll be able to release this to the public and to you all sometime in May. So as Darren mentioned or alluded to, the statewide address information is plentiful, and we wanted to create this space that's easy to access and includes everything all in one place while still being, meaningful, and not too overly cumbersome. So we include all of these inconsistency reports Darren's mentioned, as well as 7 status reports and maps, and the locator for geocoding single addresses is also in here as well. In the program resources, we have links. That application houses all this information or provides the direct links to access it. So some of those links that Darren showed you, you will be able to have buttons in here that you can directly access those. So we include additional information outside of the inconsistencies, but the inconsistencies, the reports page in here, that is the bread and butter of the application. And the other pieces are just more informational statistics. And we use those to track the program's progress and certain characteristics of North Carolina addresses. These informational pieces of the application help us to review and compare month over month updates and evaluate certain scenarios we've historically encountered. A couple of those examples are, say, sub-addresses are suddenly missing entirely from a county. We might want to investigate that, especially if they historically did exist. Maybe address points from a municipality are missing from a county, or things like that. Maybe a county all of a sudden has inconsistencies for every single point on the map. Maybe something was just mismatched in the field mapping for geocom. So these allow us to communicate with geocom and you, all the authoritative sources, to investigate the reasoning that those kinds of things might happen. And maybe it's just, an accident that we can quickly fix on either side. So our hope is for this to be a resource that helps us to better the AddressNC program products, as well as being able to complete that loop Darren talks about back to geocom and NextGen for any kind of improvement efforts for that. It's important to us that the products are created to the county level and that county filtering easily translates throughout the application. One last mention before I get in there is that this is intended currently for laptop, desktop size screens. In the future, we will have probably changed that to be tablet and mobile size screens, but for now, the large screens is what it is intended for. So this is the application that I'm sharing right now. What you see right now is the splash screen. And so the purpose of this splash screen is to introduce the application. It has a few helpful tips how to navigate. And then we include the AddressNC disclaimer, which is in all of the metadata as well. And there's a few other notes in here that are worthwhile. So this will populate every time you open the application. It can always be pulled back up. And if you refresh the screen, it'll show back up as well. So when a user browses to the application, you get that splash screen, and when you OK through it, you see this home page. We have 3 pages in the experience: a home page, a status page, and a reports page. The purpose of the home page is just to orient users with the AddressNC product. We have a time since last update map, and then we have inconsistency information and address counts as well. The status page over here, the purpose of the status page is to highlight specific statistics that sectorized North Carolina addresses, and we track progress and change through these 6 tabs. We have progress over time, total county inconsistencies, new and updated addresses, sub-address locations, address counts by population, and the geocoding web app that Darren has already shown. The purpose of the reports page here, this is the bread and butter again. This is to visualize the inconsistencies that are discovered through the AddressNC processing. The inconsistencies are broken out into the broad characteristic categories that Darren mentioned earlier. And so these are all here across the top. And then each one of those, we have consistent symbology on the map. So whether the standard was applied, or if it was discovered to be invalid, or if it was an invalid and a standard was applied to some other field, those symbols are consistent throughout the application. One other thing that differentiates the experience from when you pull in your REST services to your GIS projects, we've applied common language to the pop-ups, and so instead of just seeing a table of content attribute fields, we have a sentence or a short paragraph describing what was discovered, and then in addition to that, the relevant fields. So I'll go back to the home page. We include these buttons here on the top right hand side. And so if you want to browse to NC OneMap, there's that there for you. And then we have all of our AddressNC documentation type information. These open up PDF documents. So that is there as buttons. The map is a time since last update, similar to the parcels map that is on NC OneMap. And so this displays the time since a county has last made a change to the data in GeoComm. And these dates are solely based off of the last time AddressNC has downloaded data from GeoComm. So in this instance, April 3rd was the last time AddressNC updated. And so that will remain stagnant until our next update, but the symbology, the colors on the map, it's dynamic and will continue to change. So if we don't update AddressNC for some reason for 3 months, this map is going to look a lot more red and isn't necessarily truth. So that's just something to keep in mind. The chart down below shows total inconsistency counts by county. In the splash screen, we mentioned that there's 3 categories of inconsistencies that we do not include because their large numbers influence how this graph looks significantly. So zips, which Darren mentioned, those are pretty subjective zip codes. And then nuns and others, we'll look at those later, but those are not included in here. And so that's this chart. The table over here is that same table Darren mentioned and showed you. There's 3 different ways to access it. And so it's county, your categorical inconsistency, and then the very specific inconsistency that goes with that category. And then we have the count in there as well. This bottom left-hand side includes the total address count for this update. And so for April, we have over 6 million records. And then we have a total county address count when you make a map selection that populates there. So the most important part of the homepage is that when a map is selected, a county is selected on this map, it propagates that filter to the reports pages. So when you navigate over to reports after making a selection, you don't have to filter through the other 99 counties of the state. You can just see exactly what you want to see when you want to see it. So I'll show an example of that here. If I select Johnson County and I zoom to it, it's also going to change the map scale on all of the reports. So it will filter if there's not any inconsistencies for that county, it will be empty, but here's an example of how that would filter. I go over to the status page. I'll go through each of these tabs and describe what the purpose is and how you can use it. So progress over time is a way for us to track address counts for the state and counties. This enables us to show the general progress as well as flag areas that may not show positive progress. So if we download data and for some reason there's a few municipalities missing from a specific county's data, that's going to flag us to, go investigate what happened, get a new download, or maybe it's on the upload side. So that's where we would want to have the opportunity to talk to the authoritative source, and maybe we can figure out why those points are missing. But in general, we hope for this page to show progress. And so when we finally got AddressNC more stable, I would say, that was in June of 2023. And so every update since then, we've been tracking the counts for the state. So when you come in here, these are state counts for each of the AddressNC updates. And then this bottom right-hand graph is the progress count change since June. So for Buncombe County, there's a positive almost 8,000 address points since June of 2023. So the way to interact with this map, if you select a county, it's going to change the graphs down below to show just for that county. So here we have Orange County. It has 2,200 positive address increase since June of 2023. And then these are the counts for each of those months. I'm browsing to the total county inconsistencies tab, where inconsistencies are most prevalent. We use this internally to determine major changes in county inconsistency sums between updates. So perhaps we notice a specific inconsistency occurring in a county that's an indicator of, say, a mismatched field in GeoComm. That's when we'd like to have the opportunity to reach out to the authoritative source to figure out the reasoning and how we could make it better or make that update so that it's up to date in the AddressNC data set. So the functionality here is very similar. If you select a county, it's going to select on the table. So I have one selection here. If I want to view that single selection without having to scroll, I can show that selection. So Wilson County has 48,000 inconsistencies. The charts here, this is a set of charts with grouped inconsistency counts. So if you want to know, what counties have more inconsistencies, you can browse there, or not as many inconsistencies. It's just general information. The new and updated addresses tab, the purpose of this is a little bit more complex, but provides a lot of information. The purpose is to show where new, and I say that in quotes because new addresses, there's a few different categories of those, but we look at this from since the last update to this update, what is new or what has changed. So this tab includes a button at the bottom for how to help me understand this map better. So there's general map instruction. This map is intended to visualize new and changed addresses. New can represent three different things. A truly new address, it has a complete unique set of parsed address fields and a location that's never existed before. It could be a change in parsed fields. So say you had a parent address and then you added sub address information. That would be a change. And then lastly, it could be a change to a location. So say my address point used to be on the street. Now it is on a site-specific location. So that would be the third type of change. So we also have the accordion chart again, so you can see which counties have most change in the last month or least change or no change. You want to expand all the layers. There's a little button here. You can turn them all on, turn them all off. But what we have included here are new address counts, and they're separated out. We've created densities for those, and so they're scale dependent. So right now we're looking at just county new counts. But if I zoom in, you'll start seeing clusters populate. You can notice where some new addresses are. Further you zoom in, you start seeing these different densities. There's address location densities and USNG proximity densities. So the USNG proximity, those are those changed location addresses. So say you move it from the street to the site specific. You can view those. These are the point values for those. So if I have new USNG points and the density populated, you can visualize that. So I'll show a couple examples here. On each and every page tab in the experience, you'll find a place where you can search for an address. And so it uses the AddressNC locator geocoding to discover that address. So if I search for 2811 North, select the point, and it's going to take me exactly where I'm looking. So there's a new USNG proximity point here. If I turn on all the address points from last month's updates, I can see that there's a little bit of offset here. So maybe a point got moved. You know, this is very minor, but you can look to see with the pop-ups. This is 2811 North O'Henry. And then this is the new point where it exists. And so then another example. So now I'm going to switch over to look at just new address points. So here's a cluster of new address points that didn't previously exist. So here's some addresses that existed last month, and then these are the new ones here. So it's kind of fun to look around to see where progress is in your community or other communities. For sub-addresses, the sub-address location map is another map packed with information. The purpose here is to visualize sub-addresses and their densities across the state. We have two charts on the bottom. You can quickly go to where has the most sub-addresses, these different counties, or which counties have the least amount of sub-addresses. Also on the map, we've highlighted counties that have no sub-addresses. So if you see this and you know, you're the authoritative source, you know your county has sub-addresses, this is where we would love to, you know, collaborate with you and try to figure out how we can get those sub-addresses into GeoComm so that we can use them in AddressNC. We also track whether a sub-address is new, expanded, or if it hasn't changed at all. And so I have a couple examples of that. So here, all of these green points are new sub-addresses. They previously did not have any sub-address location there, so those are new. And then here's an example of an expansion. So if I click here, it's going to select both of those points there, last month and this month. And so this is this month's address. It's 1617 West Roosevelt Boulevard, Unit T. If I browse over to last month, it just didn't have the unit information. So this is a expansion of an address where it used to not have sub-address information, but now it does. And that's great. That's what we really like to see. The address counts by population page. Purpose of this is really simple, and it's likely only going to change over time. But it's good for general knowledge of the state. Where are the people? Where are the addresses? Where's less people and less addresses, and the in-between as well. This is a great example of there's use case for incorporating population into the AddressNC points. And then lastly, on the status page, we have that same geocoding web app that Darren previously showed. If you want to search for AddressNC, you go here, you search for your address. We've also included these two buttons below, so you can quickly discover geocoding resources. So here's your locator. Here's how you can add the locator to your Pro project. So there's videos on NC OneMap. Those are just quick links for easy access. Now, back to the reports page. So I'm going to go through each of these and just give an example of what these could mean. Users can navigate across these 14 different tabs. The address inconsistency and stub address inconsistency pages are a little bit different. We have 3 layers, 3 charts, and 3 tables that are all corresponding, just to try to save space and kind of group like things as well. Sub addresses has unit, floor, and building, while other tabs just have a single layer. So if I look at the pre options, so address input output, that would be your like street name. The pre would be anything before the street name, and the post would be anything after the street name. So you can come in and you can go back to your home page and search for a specific county if you want. Maybe I'll do Wake County. Zoom there, and that's going to filter my results in the reports page and also zoom. So Wake County has one type of pre inconsistency, and that's an address type standard. So you can click on one of these points, and I mentioned before that we have common language, so there's a street type that was changed from United States Highway. So the highways have that comes up a lot in just the address information, so that might be moved. If we go over to sub-address inconsistency and look at units, Wake County has a few different inconsistencies for sub-addresses. And so you can click on the map, you can click on the table as well, and it will zoom to that specific point, and you can open up the information. So this unit 203 was standardized from the original value of apartment APT 203. And so during the AddressNC processing, the APT is removed and it's put in as apartment, but in a different field. So the unit value is just 203. That's what we want. It's great that it says apartment. The standard, if for AddressNC, if it doesn't say anything, it just says 203, then it would be unit 203. So there's unit changes, inconsistencies, floor, and then building as well. So if we look at a building inconsistency, I have to turn the layer on. So the building had a blank. It was a blank, and so now it got changed to be a null. Municipal conflicts, this is goes back to the municipalities. So the conflict flag, if an incorporated value was given, but the point lies outside of the incorporated polygon, then that gets flagged. And that's these examples. So this point doesn't lie within this municipality. It's in an ETJ, and so that's why this one gets flagged. If we look at county conflicts, these are really, the majority are going to be like on the borders, and so some of these examples are going to say this was given as Wake County, but it actually, the point falls in Durham County. And so that's a flag that we look at there. Political inconsistencies, Wake County doesn't have any, and so this is what it will look like if you use that filter from the home page and then go to your inconsistency reports. If there are none, then it's just blank. There's also no boundary inconsistencies. Are zip inconsistencies, and so if you want to look at just a specific type, so I want to look at these 131 inconsistencies that have zip name invalid, you can look at those and filter that way as well. It filters both the map and the table. So the remaining ones we have are zip conflicts. Again, zip inconsistencies and conflicts are some of the most subjective. You can do the same filtering here. So for conflicts, we use the point that was given and use the authoritative overlay to see if there's a difference. And so if there's a difference between zip codes and the authoritative source that we use for US zip codes, we're going to note that here. State conflicts, there's not going to be state conflicts for Wake County. Those will probably just be the bordering counties. So that'd be your point falls outside of North Carolina. Those points will get flagged. As we move through, floaters are the points that are outside of a parcel point. So if you zoom into some of these, the parcels will populate and you'll see that that point falls outside of a parcel. That might be very valid, but the AddressNC program is wanting site-specific addresses, so that's where we get these flags. We have other inconsistencies and other incorporated inconsistencies. These are just more informational. Duplicates, that's where we have a single address that has or multiple addresses with the single street name. So there's multiple 1321 Crab Orchard Drive apartment 2s. We note those. And then lastly are null inconsistencies. So if the providers are not giving any zip codes or municipalities, we'll note those and fill them in with the authoritative sources. So this is the experience in a nutshell. I'm going to hand it back over to Darren. He has a couple more slides.
As you can see, I said before, it looks like a web page, but it's just packed with very complex GIS functionality in there. But I hope that it serves all the ends, whether you're the novice or the person that's doing the addresses, or you're just interested, all those things. It is a one-stop shop, we believe. But once again, you can choose to go to the project website or do it in desktop GIS, any of those things that you prefer. So I'll kind of end, I think AddressNC is the whole package. Like I said, it's that sustainability that really drives it, gives it that confidence and reliability. Next gen is I don't think it's going to go away. So I think we have a product that's there for a long time. We think it's platform driven. So obviously NC OneMap is how you get to all this information. If you're not familiar with Esri is the world's leading GIS software vendor, and they offer up the World Street geocoder, which AddressNC is now embedded within. So we've been doing that for about a year and a half now. There's the national address data set. I believe there's not all 50 states participate in that, and so that gets uploaded to that federal source quarterly, and it aligns with all the standards that they administer too. So one thing you'll see is in AddressNC, we standardize everything to be, for example, North Carolina highway or United States highway, because that's what the NAD standard is. So you might see that a lot in our data. And finally, we're talking to Google and finding ways to integrate AddressNC into Google. But as you can imagine, that's very technical and very high end, but yet we think we have something there. So more to come on that. We think it's dynamic. We've seen from those bar charts and through the change and through all the quality improvements that we see being pushed through next gen, that it's definitely not a static product. So that's one of the best things of all, honestly, I think. Obviously, it's all spatial. It meets any end user's needs, whether you're that GIS person or that person that's just interested in seeing some patterns or whatever it may be. So it's definitely got that spatial side to it, obviously, and that's what we like. And then finally, it's very analytical. So you can just look at, what's your problem? What's your requirements? There's a GIS solution, and AddressNC can fulfill that in many use cases, especially when you're looking at parcels. We can integrate with all those big state framework data sets like building footprints and parcels and the broadband data, ortho imagery, all that is all integrated with AddressNC. So I'll leave you with that. It's the whole package. And so once again, there's our project website. I'm the project manager for AddressNC. I'll talk about this all day. If you would like, please email us or give us a call. And more to come on the experience. And like I said, we'll probably look at doing that next month sometime. And then as far as that's concerned, be on the lookout for another email like you've received before. We will notify you that way. We will notify you through the NC OneMap announcements and through social media as well, through NC OneMap, Twitter, all those kinds of things. And so be on the lookout for that. More to come very soon. Yeah. And so let's see, I guess we can get back to some of those questions then. We can start with Mike Parkinson you had a question about the directionals and the street types. Yeah. So I think what I'm trying to understand is, if I'm hearing this right, that GeoComm administers a schema that supports both abbreviated versions and full versions for those values. So Mike's question was talking about the schema that GeoComm administers for the street direction and the street type. We take all of those values and standardize them into the fully spelled out version. We don't use the abbreviations in our output, and it's as simple as that.
Then you check the inconsistencies from that point.
Right. So the inconsistencies, we'll show you that we changed it, but it's a standard. So it is what it is. And then let's see, we had another question about zip codes. So the authoritative source for our zip codes, once again, zip codes are very subjective. We use the USA zips. It's the authoritative national zip code layer, polygons. And that's the best source that we have. This state of North Carolina does not have a statewide data set for zips. And so that's the one that we use.
It's not the Census Bureau. So Mike's follow-up question was U.S. Census Bureau zip code tabulation areas.
No,
that's not what you use.
No, we don't use it. We don't use the tabulation areas because they serve a different purpose. And we looked at that for a while, but we swapped back to the USA zips because of the results that we were getting. And so that's the deal with that. And once again, zip codes are what they are. And sometimes they're driven by administrative or political reasons. And so it is what it is. And I'll say one thing, Ashton was talking about our null inconsistencies, that the tab that you saw in the reports page. So one thing that we do is if the data that we're given is blank or null, we will take the overlay and populate those fields with that data. So once again, we don't change your data, but if there's nothing there to begin with, we will update it with what we find. And that includes zip town, zip code, anything, municipal boundaries, all that. And so hopefully that answered that question.
Then how to update zip code source. I think that's a good question to maybe bring back to the statewide mapping advisory committee and some other working groups, and maybe we can get an answer to find out, run that up the line.
Mm-hmm.
Try to understand zip codes more at who's the authoritative source and how do we get these changed and how do you go about that? I think there's a few avenues that we can pursue through the council.
Right. And when Ben talks about the council, the Geographic Information Coordinating Council.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's fine. That's the state oversight board, if you will, for all things GIS in the state, and they set policies and approve initiatives, things like that. So that is a good one.
So we'll bring that back to that group, and then if you're a part of the local government committee, I think we can identify this as something that's been highlighted as an issue from a local perspective and try to push it back through that avenue to the LGC, and try to get information out for people if that's a question that keeps coming up.
Right. And so, Ashton also mentioned in those inconsistency counts, the zips are one thing we don't embed in those counts because it would just overwhelm the intent of that data. So yes, I knew zip codes would be a topic for sure.
A good question, Diane. Thanks.
But at the same time, you can't have an address without a zip code. So what's it going to be, right? Let's see. For the release of the AddressNC Experience, that was a question. I said, at a minimum, we will send an email to you the same way that we sent it before for this invitation. That's one way. CGIA maintains all the contacts that we can in the state, whether it's those GIS managers or any other or state contacts, things like that, whether they're called contacts. So we have a pretty extensive list there, and that's how we communicate. But at the same time, if you are in touch with NC OneMap, we post announcements on there all the time. So just be on the lookout for that. But at a minimum, you will get the direct email from us because we know that you attended this webinar. Let's see here. Rachel, you were asking how to add the county's data to a ProMap. So you're talking, if you're still on the line, Rachel,
Yeah, just can you show how to add like more county back to a ProMap so you can more easily follow the errors to track them?
So that you've added the NC OneMap service listing to your catalog section. If you go to catalog, and then that's what that's going to do is it's going to show up under your favorites, and then see in my case, I just have it standardized. I renamed it to NC OneMap, but you'll see what you added in catalog. And once you do that, you expand all those listings and then expand AddressNC. And then so the first thing you see is the geocode, or the second you see are all the web maps that we have that's that service the experience. But then here are the feature layers, and there's all the layers that we talked about. And so if, for example, you're looking for floaters, all you have to do is just drag this into your map, and that data will get added to your table of contents. And then, oh, and by the way, you can see that we have predefined symbology for all those points that are outside of the parcels. And then you can just simply go in there and put a definition query on your county. And really that's so we would do more in your case.
I think the part I was missing was the services part to start with. So
Oh, so adding the NC OneMap service listing to
add that. I put that in chat.
okay. And that's also when we provide this recording back to you, that URL is also in the PowerPoint, as well as that barcode that I provided in there as well. So there's 3 different ways to get to that. So just check out the chat. But once again, if you're doing that with that URL that Ben just provided to you, you're simply just going to you're going to open up catalog pane, go to add item, and do new ArcGIS server. And then you're going to plug in that URL. And once again, like I said before, this is a one-time. This will propagate across all your catalog instances for any pro project that you do, or in ArcMap, it would be that way too. And when you do that, it should add it to your favorites. And then once again, there's that change summary table we talked about that you would begin to start looking at everything. Okay. Well, I hope this is what you expected. And like I said, if you think that there's things that aren't right, or you want to talk about some things, or you need help with your field mapping for GeoComm, or if you think that some of the data that you provide is really there and it's not being picked up, that's really important for us to know. Something might be falling through the cracks when it goes from one system to another. That's good information. And if you want a one-on-one demo of what we found, like I would show you like in Pro, just like we just did, please call and we can do that anytime you want. Or if you want to talk about details or how to do something, please give us a call. We're always open to that. Other than that, keep in touch. And that's it for now. Be on the lookout for those emails and announcements. Tell us what you think.